Hello, everyone, and welcome to this NatSpec Tech Ability webinar. Today, we're covering IT to support AT. This is one that I've wanted to do for a little while, and it's to join these two worlds. Often what we do with AT relies on a lot of IT infrastructure and support behind it. So the idea is today that I talk less and we hear more from IT professionals who do this day in, day out. We're going to hear some from Daniel Buck. Hi, Daniel. Welcome from Derwent College. He's the network manager there. And Trevor Edwards sadly couldn't make it today. So I grabbed him on Friday and we managed to do some recording. So we've got a recording of him. Feel free to ask questions throughout. And also it'd be great to hear what your job role is in the chat if you get a chance, just so we know who we're talking to. That would be great. Daniel, welcome. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your college?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the network manager at Derwent College. I've been here for 7.5 years now, although I started as help desk, but I was the only member of the IT team, and now there's, I think, 7 of us, if you include the database side. At the moment, I'm doing our AT bit as well. So AT and IT are one, but we're looking to grow that. We're growing things organically as we can. We do residential and non-residential, and we've got 3 satellite sites in addition to our main sites. We've got quite a spread of geography and quite a spread of learners as well.
Okay, great. And when you say that you're looking to grow things, what do you mean in that aspect?
So partly staffing. It would be great to get a dedicated assistive technologist, because I'm split at the moment time-wise between doing some AT and the network side of things, and also resources as well in terms of being able to fabricate things and that sort of thing. Like, there's no point going out and spending £250,000 on a machine shop we're barely going to use, but we might be edging towards more things to help us make or modify things that exist to suit certain learners.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's actually, for today's webinar, it's actually good that you have that split role, because lots of colleges don't have the capacity at the moment for a full-time assistive technologist. So that'd be really useful.
Yeah, our leadership is supportive and they're open to it, but obviously we've got to do enough AT that warrants it, and then things should hopefully snowball from there.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Daniel. And thanks for providing this organizational chart. I thought this was really good to kind of see where IT and AT sit in your organization. Could you talk through it a little bit and just tell us how AT runs and who's responsible for it in your organization?
Yeah, sure. So I answer directly to Daniel Rowley, who's our head of digital services, and I believe he's here, so I have to be careful what I say. But he is very supportive in what we do. He's quite open-minded, and he answers directly to Merrill, who is our CEO and principal. So we've got a very free hand in terms of what we're allowed to play with or try out and that sort of thing. We're not very restricted, although there is a bit of a balance between going and spending ludicrous amounts of money for some tiny gain and trying to get something effective for that particular learner. So we're, I would say, probably at early stages at the moment, but we're growing. Okay. We do a lot of crosstalk with therapies and curriculum, and a bit with care as well. But I would say the AT side at the moment sits firmly with Dan Rowley and with me. And I think we pretty much don't do anything without the input from the occupational therapists.
Okay.
Because obviously there's a side to things that, as technology people, we don't understand, and we wouldn't be aware of with orthopedic bits and pieces. So at the moment, we're sort of led by them. They'll come to us with a problem and some ideas, and we'll see what we can do to help.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Thanks, Daniel. No problem. And we'll just hear a little bit from Trevor now.
Okay. So, hi, Trevor, and thanks for taking some time today. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Trevor Edwards. I'm Portland College's IT manager. I've been here just coming up for 4 years now. Um, Lovely environment, lovely place to work. Lots of challenges, but the challenges are always positive ones. My background is quite a few years now, 32 years in IT. I started off as a field service engineer, worked my way through hardware support, software support, desktop outsourcing in the late noughties. I've worked for traditionally more corporate environments. So I used to work for many years in food manufacturing in IT. I also headed up the infrastructure team at a nationwide food distributor. So a lot of what I did was the very quick, very fast-paced, beyond 24/7 IT, very robust systems, but that comes with its challenges. And what I wanted to do is get out of that corporate world and actually get somewhere where I can make change, and that's what brought me to this.
I can imagine it's very different doing this this kind of work.
Indeed, yes, it is. It still has its, immediacy that things have to happen now and we have to get things right. But equally, what's really good about it is you're not an IT department that's an X million pound black hole somewhere that people only see where there's an issue. You can really be there and you can make change and you can drive improvement, and you get to see the smile at the end, which is great for me. Okay.
One of the big ones that we often get asked with colleges, they're considering they've got so many devices, they're not sure where to go next. So what would you say to colleges who are considering whether to go with a platform like Microsoft or Google, or use Apple devices, or a combination of them?
I think it depends on what your estate is. So if you are completely Microsoft, then you might want to consider staying within the completely Microsoft camp. So you might be looking at Microsoft Surface, you might be looking at some other form of Windows tablet, desktop, laptop environment. What you find now in IT, and this has happened over the last 10 years and is continuing to happen, is that IT is very much consumer driven now. So people will come into colleges and campuses with very different experiences. Some of them will really like the Apple experience. Some of them will work on an iPad and that's how they feel comfortable. Some of them will like the Chrome environments. Some of them will like Windows. Certainly our approach at Portland has been not to sit particularly in one camp, not as to hinder other people, but in the back of your mind, you've always got to think about the control. If you're completely Microsoft, things will be very neat. You'll have Active Directory, you'll have things like SCCM, everything could be completely controlled. But it
Sorry, Trevor, could you just explain those terms just briefly?
Yes, sorry. So if you stay in the Microsoft camp, then most businesses will have Active Directory, which in effect is Microsoft's ability for you to log in and work and share files. It also controls things called group policy, which is what your machines are allowed to do and allowed not to do. Simple things like whether you can control what the wallpaper is, whether you've got access to certain resources. Microsoft have products like Microsoft Computer, I can never remember the exact acronym, but SCCM in effect is the control of creating a master image for all of your PCs. So when a desktop or laptop, whatever it is, comes into your business, you have a standard, in our case, Portland desktop that goes onto all of them, looks exactly the same, so the look and feels good. That then becomes a completely managed device. So you could control when Windows updates go out to it. If people want an extra application loading onto it, that can just be pushed out and centrally managed. That's very neat. It's very great for things like printing as well, that you've got everything under one roof. The challenges with that is that everything's under one roof. So your other option is to look down the Android, Google Chrome, Apple environments. You've then got to think in this modern world of cyber essentials, how do you make sure those devices are completely secure, completely safe and usable by your community? And how does that impact things like sharing files, printing documents, working remotely? Our approach has been to look at all of the camps and give people things that are tailored for them, but that may not be the right approach for everyone. It's not an easy answer.
Yeah, would you say there was to be quite a difference for a kind of college your size and a much smaller college with the capacity of what they could support?
Yes, I would definitely. And I think if you were a small college, that's when you might want to start looking. If you were a small college and you were greenfield and you knew that you got technology that's woefully out of date and need to make a stand, that is when I would say that's a good example of getting into a specific camp. So you may look at the Google camp. So you put your mail into Gmail, you use your documents in Google Docs, you use things like Chromebooks. They're all evolved in the same ecosystem. Or equally, you go Office 365, you keep everything in one place, knowing that Office 365 is available on any platform as well.
Okay, so how does that compare for you, Daniel? Is that a similar type of kind of direction that you take?
Yeah, we're using almost all Windows, and we are using SCCM as well and Office 365, so it's very similar. We've got some iPads used and we've got remote management on those, but the approach is the same. Okay,
that makes sense. And thanks, Rowan, for pointing out that SCCM equals System Center Configuration Manager and has been replaced by MEM, Microsoft Endpoint Manager. There's so many acronyms, aren't there, for this area of work. Yeah, please pick me up at any time if we don't explain any acronyms, because I know there's going to be a range of IT knowledge here. So Daniel, based on those systems, how do you balance security versus accessibility as an IT professional, thinking of things like passwords, Alexa, permissions, all those kind of things?
It is very much a balancing act. On the one side, you've got the compliance you've got to deal with. So you've got things like prevent duty, keeping children keeping children safe in education, GDPR, cyber essentials, all that sort of stuff. But on the other hand, if the learners can't access those systems, there's no point in having them and no point in maintaining any compliance. So our learners typically have simplified passwords. And some have simplified usernames. We're in the process at the moment of trying to roll out something called Windows Hello. And that is I suppose, multi-factor authentication system, in that you don't have to use multiple factors, but you could use a password or a PIN or your face in front of a webcam, or little tags, that sort of thing. So we haven't rolled that out yet, but we've started to make that easier. For things like Alexas, they're inherently quite safe as far as we can tell. So the ones without a screen can only give you an audio response. So depending on what parental controls are set on Alexa, if you say something like, Alexa, how do I kill myself? She will say, I don't know. Or she'll say, please don't do it. Call the Samaritans on, and then whatever their number is, and that sort of thing. And the screen ones are the same. They operate within little walled gardens. So you ask it to play a video, it's something quite curated from Amazon or YouTube. You know, they're not going to be getting on Pornhub with it or something like that. So we actually set up a dedicated wireless network for our Alexa devices here that the learners bring in, because the Alexas just don't work if you try and route their traffic through our Smoothwall, which does our internet filtering and monitoring. So we don't give that password out. There's exactly 3 people on site that know the password. They're myself, Dan Rowley, who is my line manager, and Joe Williams, who's a colleague that works with me. So we will go, if a learner or staff member says Alexa needs to be put on the network, we'll go and put it on, and then that password is safe effectively from prying eyes and being put on another device, so that those Alexa devices can work. We've got some learners that use them for like training their own voice, they use them for calling home, that sort of thing. And we had a similar issue with games consoles, because most of those have got a web browser in as well, which complicates things. So we give those a fixed network address on one of our Wi-Fi networks, so that we can address them, and they're added to a device group on our Smoothwall. So we don't filter them going out to Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, that sort of thing. But anything else, we apply filtering, and if we get a report, it would be based on IP address, but we've got a list of who that would come back to know if there's a safeguarding problem there. So that all the games work transparently, but we're still meeting the requirements that we've got for the internet filtering and monitoring. So it gets quite complex, and it's definitely a balancing act, but that's what we do currently.
Great, thanks, Daniel. It is complex, and that's why it's fantastic to have you here saying these kind of things, so that people don't have to reinvent the wheel and do some of the research themselves, hopefully. Just to mention for everyone attending, feel free to ask questions throughout. I've got some kind of pre-written questions, but we only have so much time, so if you ask a question, we'll try and get through it. So yeah, as we go through, if there's anything you want clarification on, then just let us know. And Daniel, can I stick with you and just ask you what colleges IT teams need to know about either roaming profiles or user experience virtualization, as it's known?
Yeah, sure. So we use roaming profiles here. So what that means is all of your preferences when you're using a computer are stored in your profile. So that might be the arrangement of your desktop icons, how you've got Outlook set up, what desktop wallpaper you've got, your favorites in Chrome, anything like that. Because they're roaming, that means that they will transfer from computer to computer when you log in somewhere else. So we've got a pair of servers that those profiles are stored on. And then those servers are actually replicated to each of our satellite sites. We've got a local copy. The downside to roaming profiles is they can get quite large in terms of data. Sometimes they can be multiple gigs, thanks to Microsoft for dumping everything with Teams and Outlook in there and all of your Google cache. So we didn't want to be transferring those across the slow links. User experience virtualization we don't use, but we may do in the future. And that is basically the Microsoft Azure or cloud equivalent to that as far as a user sees it. It's a lot more complex in the background. But if you were using Azure provisioning for devices, what that means is your IT team does all the settings and can post you out a laptop or a Surface or something, and you sign in with your do an email address. It'll do everything, all of your software installs and everything. User experience virtualization can be set up to bring across all of your preferences as well, if you had any saved there. So it's basically the cloud equivalent of roaming profiles.
Okay, great. And from an AT point of view, what does that mean for the learner?
So if you've got accessibility settings set, so high contrast or large text or something like that, but it'll follow that learner when they sign in somewhere. So they don't need to get help from staff if they can't set that themselves. For example, they can just sign in and get cracking.
That's powerful. I can kind of see a scenario where a student has been able to log onto their computer easier because they have Windows Hello set up, making it a little bit easier to log in. They have their settings there. You're starting to build up a kind of ideal situation, aren't you, for the learner's experience there?
Yeah, Rowan's made an excellent point there about folder redirection, which is also something that we do use here. So what that is your my documents or desktop contents aren't actually on the computer or laptop that you're using. They pretend to be, but they're on one of our file servers, so that they're backed up hourly.
Okay, that's great. And then they get their files in the same kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. We're going to hear a little bit more from Trevor.
One of the big ones that we often get asked with colleges, they're considering, they've got so many devices, they're not sure where to go next. So what would you say to colleges who are considering whether to go with a platform? One of the big ones.
Sorry, that's the last question. Let's try and get the right one.
How do you support learners with their own devices? That can sometimes be quite a scary thing for organisations if learners have started to bring their own devices. There's issues around security. So how do you manage that at Portland?
So what we're doing at Portland at the moment is we're very lucky that we've got a very skilled AT team that sit outside IT. They sit in education, but they've got some great IT skills around there. We have a separate network provisioned, which allows these learners access to the internet. It is controlled, it's got safeguarding measures on it, it's got all the prevent stuff on it, and it's key to us, it's completely separate to our network. So they can still get to any web resource they need to. They're not sat on our corporate network, so there's a level of security. We have a level of multi-factor authentication that's transparent to that end learner. So to explain multi-factor authentication, that's having a password and other means to identify you. Now, in the SEND environment, that can be quite restrictive. You know, passwords can be complex enough, but then you may be looking at people having an application on the phone to give them a code to log in. The approach we've taken with that is, by default, all our learner accounts cannot be accessed in the outside world at all. But if you're on college campus, our IP range is ring-fenced to say that you pass that level of multi-factor authentication. So then on-site, people just have a password, which is complex, but not an intolerably complex password. The challenges we have with this is that gives people access to Office 365. That's great, can get to the SharePoint. They may have the communication, or there are other aids on this device as well. Where we still struggle is the little things like helping them to print, because printers tend to sit on the corporate network. So you've got all these great multifunction printing devices, but you can't AirPrint to one of these devices because it's a Windows, network print queue. So there are challenges around it, some of them that we haven't conquered, but the key is having good people we've got a good technical team who can make sure the security is right and all the technical stuff works, and then a very good AT team that are incredibly good at that customer facing side as well, bridging the gap, talking the right language to people, not being overly complex.
Great. So just something to mention there, that there is some debate around the two-factor authentication, and I won't go too much into it now. But I can share a link that might be a good place to start. I'll share that in the chat if you are interested in two-factor authentication. Can be quite tricky for colleges to work that one out. So Daniel, how do you build relationships with the other teams in your college, thinking about linking with education, therapies, anyone else involved in AT, and yeah.
On one hand, I want to say it's difficult. On the other hand, I want to say it's easy. We've tried to stay visible where we can, so we're not just a couple of guys locked in a darkened room. Obviously, through COVID, that was quite difficult. But we try and encourage everybody to come to us with ideas, and more so to come to us with their ideas really early on. Because you tend to find that because of the compliance you've got to do, we can eliminate half of the ideas somebody's got, but then we might introduce a new half of the ideas that they just hadn't thought about. So I suppose it's the same as nurturing any other relationship, really, in that you just try to keep contact and try to say yes when you can, or if you're going to say no, you at least need to qualify that no with why, and not just say no and shut the door. Yeah, it's quite difficult to answer that question, really.
Yeah, I think it might be different in different organizations as well. And Faye's just picked up on that. What advice would you give to build that bridge specifically between IT and AT? She's saying that as the assistive technologist, she has basic IT knowledge, which isn't the best. Our IT teams are busy a lot of the time. Do I need more training by IT to understand their systems more? Do we need more meetings with IT, or one port of call?
I'd say yes to the first two, potentially, because the more you know, the more you can speak in their language. So when we're dealing with non-AT stuff, so like break fix requests, we tend to have to fish for information, and that slows things down, because we'll get one of the computers in this classroom isn't working, for example, and then we've got to go and find out which one and what do you mean by not working. Whereas if that person can tell us this computer number just won't print, we can fix that within 10 minutes. So upskilling yourself would help, but also yeah, more communication, I think, would be key. We haven't started it yet here, but the plan is at doing to have an AT steering group, or some equivalent with some similarly nebulous name. So we would have AT, IT, therapies, representatives from care and curriculum in there, just to try and meet once a month and talk through any sticking points or any future plans and that sort of thing. And then we can branch off for particular projects or solutions, but just try and get everybody talking. But by the same note, perhaps the IT team needs to make more time. Because obviously AT is important, whether it be a larger organizational problem where they need to recruit some more IT team to do that, I wouldn't know without knowing the specifics. But at the end of the day, they need to make you some time as well. And I think with a combination of those three things, it'd probably be a lot easier for all parties rather than any one simple fix.
Great, thanks, Daniel. I think you're the best person to say that, as you're on both sides of the fence. So it can't be said that AT are giving IT a hard time or the other way around. Okay, great. So Faye, hopefully that answered your question. Let me know if you've got any other follow-up questions on that. Daniel, for how close is your IT team to the students? What connections do they have with the students?
They all know us as the people that fix the Wi-Fi. So we have got everything set up so that any member of staff can help any learner get pretty much any phone, tablet or laptop connected to Wi-Fi, no problem. Obviously, some of the staff cope much better than that with others. But when it comes down to the smart TVs, the Alexas, stuff like that, there has to be us. So they're all quite familiar with us for that. Some will email us direct or call us direct if they've got a technical problem or they want some help. But we both do some extracurricular stuff as well. So I do our duty manager shifts, which can be evening or weekend. And Joe does some student engagement shifts as well. So well, I wouldn't say we're student facing. We definitely have student contact.
That's important. Yeah, it was quite a leading question actually, because based on what Faye was saying, one of the things that that I've seen in colleges is when the IT team has a good link with the students, they're more likely to understand what needs to be done and to be driving towards the same goals. And it's that whole, yeah, not being sat in a dark room, as you said. Although I think we were probably all doing that during COVID, weren't we?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm just gonna we're coming up to half an hour now, which I think is probably a good time to kind of finish most of the contents. And I just wanted to say thanks, Daniel, and thanks to Trevor for your time. I know you're really busy, and I know you have so many different things to do at any one moment. So I really appreciate you giving up the time and sharing your knowledge. If the feedback's good from this, we can do more of these. We can answer specific questions. So if anyone has any specific questions that you want to ask, then please do. And yeah, thank you all for attending. And if you want to get in touch with us, email us at techability@natspec.org.uk. Follow us at Twitter at tech_ability1. And let us know if there's any other webinars that you'd find useful. Hopefully we have some people today that we wouldn't usually have, maybe some more kind of IT based. So we'd love to know how we can support you better with AT as well.